Hold on. Take two.
All right, here we go. Now we're back.
You didn't
Welcome
do
back.
a sound check. That is why you didn't do a sound check.
I know. I didn't do well. The thing is that I look at like the desktop audio for you, and then you're not coming through either. Wait, no. Talk again, real quick. We'll
Yeah.
do the sound check now.
See,
Okay, you're good.
isn't a sound check, a mic check like TCOM 101?
No, it's not. It's like 102. You don't learn sound checks until 102.
Mm.
Well, we are back here on the Crash Course podcast. My name is CraigCrash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B Scott. We had to get that back in. I can't the show can't go on if I don't say all those things.
Oh.
So we're good. Crisis averted there. I had a little bit of a hiccup, but we're all good. You know what? We just it's reacting to things. It's getting back into the swing of things. We had the whole internet thing last week, and now this week, we had the whole audio not working, aka me having to hook up my headset. So we're back. We're on now, and we got a lot of hoops to talk about across the state of Indiana today. We're going to talk about the Pacers, their slow start to the season, kind of react to that a little bit. We're also going to get into some college hoops. We're doing what we did for college football. We're doing one podcast dedicated to college basketball around the state of Indiana, and then we're going to go to the entire nation next week. And so if you want to hear more about college basketball around the country, that'll be on next week's podcast. But tonight we're going to talk Hoosiers, we're going to talk Boilermakers, we're going to talk Fighting Irish. So we're going to get into the weeds there with college basketball all around the state. But first, B. Scott, I need to hear in detail not only your kid's first Colts game, but also their trick-or-treat experience.
Oh man, well the Colts game, that was an experience in itself. So we're part of an organization called A Kid Again, and one of their board members is Colts cornerback Kenny Moore. So he donated tickets occasionally, and we got asked if we would like some. They're like, well, these tickets are awesome. So at Lucas Oil Stadium, there are a couple sections that have like 2 rows that are right on the field. So that's where these tickets were. Well, unfortunately, I can't get my wheelchair down there. So they're trying to figure out all these ways where we can sit. So finally, the head usher guy in this area said, "Follow me." He brings us and he moves us to the club seats, which, better view than sitting right on the field, to be honest. But the best part for Jillian, free popcorn, all you can eat. And she ate her weight's worth in free popcorn. Not only that, later on in the night, we took the kids trick-or-treating, and we just went to a few houses around little one block area around my parents' house. And I walked over to a church for their trunk or treat. Mm-hmm. And they came home after trick-or-treating in the neighborhood. We had to dump the buckets. Each kid filled their bucket. Now we're talking a trick-or-treat size bucket. We're not talking like a Home Depot or Lowe's gallon bucket, anything like that. So we had to empty their buckets. We went over to the trunk or treat, and they filled their buckets again. So these kids essentially filled 4 Halloween buckets worth of candy. And basically their first time out trick-or-treating.
I mean, that's pretty much
pretty successful night.
Pretty much the best you could hope for.
I mean, I don't think I ever had that much of success as a kid in this neighborhood. And when I got a little bit older, I would go out later rather than the early part. When you go out later, the key is to go out later because people are ready to get rid of their Halloween candy and stop answering the door. So they dump whatever they have left into your bag.
Yeah.
Little life hack right there for you.
B. Scott's got the tricks of the trade down. He is ready to.
Well, the tricks of the trade also, if you are a dad and you have young kids, go through their candy and find the candy that they can't eat. Like Starbursts or, some of the stuff they actually can't eat. They're too little to have gobstoppers or anything.
Right.
But guess what? The candy they can't eat becomes your candy that you can eat.
That's pretty.
Also, they're too young to realize that they may be able to eat a Snickers. So the Snickers becomes yours.
You're like, man, thank you guys for collecting all this candy for me. You guys go to your room. We're gonna, pig out on all your candy.
And then I think be on the lookout, 3C Media fans. We're hopefully this weekend, my wife and I are gonna try to shoot the Jimmy Kimmel video. I think it'll be way too late to do it for Jimmy Kimmel. Obviously, I think his is airing tomorrow or tonight.
Right.
But we'll have our own and we'll get it put out on the 3C Media Twitter.
I like it.
So definitely be on the lookout for that. If we do it, we gotta figure it out. And if we get a good reaction, you'll see it.
Right.
But if we just have a 3-year-old that is no, and that's it, then no, not worth it.
No, definitely not. Well, it's funny because my sister did that a couple of years ago. She she did that with my niece. I don't know if my nephew was born yet, but anyway, did it with my niece, and she just kind of looked back at the camera like she didn't know what was going on. She's like, okay, cool. Sick, guys, you ate all my candy.
I don't believe you one tiny bit. But
she's like, I remain skeptical.
Now, Craig, if Uncle Craig said he ate all the candy.
Oh yeah, they're like, yeah, that's probably it. Because my sister and brother-in-law are really into healthy eating and all that stuff. They're big health nuts. So I'm sure that they're like, you did not eat candy. You probably wouldn't even know what to do with candy. And then they said, hey, Uncle Craig ate your candy. They'd be like, I believe more that at the time they were living in Cincinnati, they'd be like, I believe more that Craig drove 2.5 hours to Cincinnati and ate my candy than I believe you in my own house ate my candy. That's what I'm going to go with. That's the more believable story. Well, the story for the Pacers so far this season has not been too great, and that's what we're going to lead up.
Eat the Pacers.
Yeah, someone ate the Pacers candy, and they are acting out because of it. It's been a slow start for the Indiana Pacers so far this season. They have started 1-6, of course. As we record this, they are playing a game right now, so it could be 1-7 by the time you guys hear this. It's their worst start since 2014-15. They also started 1-6, and that was a year in which they missed the playoffs. They lost to the Hornets and Wizards by 1 point each to start the season. Then they did beat the Heat 102-91 in overtime. And then they have been on a 4-game losing streak. They lost twice to the Raptors, including a 3-point loss on Saturday, and a home loss to the Bucks and road loss to the Nets. Now, Chris Duarte has been a bright spot this season. He's averaging 18 points, 5 rebounds per game. Second amongst rookies in points per game, third amongst the Pacers in terms of points per game. And he had 27 points, 5 rebounds on opening night versus Charlotte. And I mean, if you're playing spin zone for the Indiana Pacers, you could, say how, look, 1-6 isn't great, but 2 of those losses, they had 3 games against the teams that we said a couple of weeks ago were probably the better teams in the Eastern Conference, the Heat, Bucks, and Nets. Coming away with a win against one of those teams is pretty good. And then you have, you did beat, like I said, you did beat the Heat. For whatever reason, the Pacers in Charlotte just is never a good combination. The Pacers just can't seem to win in Charlotte for whatever reason. So the losses you're really kicking yourself for are the 2 to the Raptors, because you'd like to at least come away with one of those, because
they're not a playoff team. The Raptors are not a playoff team.
No. And then you'd also like to come away with the win against the Wizards, who are literally a shell of themselves. They don't have Russ. It's not like it's the Wizards team last year. That was the playoff team.
Oh, and Bradley Beal didn't even play.
Right. So, it's a Wizards team that's a shell of itself for the most part. Not that the shell was too sturdy to begin with the Wizards, but so those are the losses you're kicking yourself for. So you'd like to say hey, we should be they'd still be under 500, I think, even if you're looking at the spin zone view of this team. And it's just. Those are the losses that really sting, those losses to the Wizards and Raptors. Now, they do have LeVert back. He is on a minutes restriction, so once he's back in full force, that's another positive for the Pacers. But, one thing I noticed kind of, digging through the weeds here, According to TeamRankings.com, the Pacers scoring by quarter looks as follows. In the league right now, they are third in the league in scoring as far as the first quarter is concerned. They're 14th in the league in terms of their second quarter scoring. Their third quarter scoring, they are 30th in the NBA. In third quarter scoring, they're scoring 19 points per game in the third quarter, and 8 points. They had 8 points in the third in their win versus the Heat. And in the fourth quarter this season, their scoring is good enough for 13th best in the league. So I mean, the Pacers, they start strong, they level off by halftime, then they fall off a freaking cliff in the third quarter, and then they can't make up enough ground to make up for the fact that they just had a horrendous third quarter. So I mean, I don't know if that's coaching, if that's like second half adjustments, what that translates to. But it's just, you'd like to think that obviously, a portion of that is the Pacers aren't quite healthy. But it's not been a good outlook. I mean, the things that they're doing wrong are fixable, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel, I think, for the Pacers. Now, whether namely the fact that it's still early in the season. It's not like the Eastern Conference. It doesn't always necessarily take a winning record to be get to the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. So I mean,
I don't know. It's going to be tougher this year. The Bulls look good. They look like legit contenders.
Right. Right, and I mean, and that's true too, because even if you say like, oh well, hey, like the Wizards were in it last year, but I mean the Pacers lost the Wizards, and were the Raptors in last year? Or were they out? Was that the first year in a while they missed the playoffs?
I don't remember.
I think they missed the playoffs though.
For some reason, the Pacers have a tendency to make Fred VanVleet look like an all-star.
Now what they need to do is trade for that. You asked about possible moves that might be one to do. It's like, you know what,
because that's an area of need, big time. He plays the point, and point guard play has been atrocious for the Pacers. I don't know what happened to TJ McConnell. Maybe he needs to be that like third point guard in the rotation because he plays better like that. Now that he's like the next guy up behind Brogdon, he's like frozen. I don't know what it is. It's so confusing. But like I saw somebody comment, and it said the biggest thing the Pacers need, they need Dan Burke back on the coaching staff. And I feel like that's the truth. Ever since Dan Burke left the coaching staff to go over to Philadelphia, it has been a total nightmare for the Pacers. Like maybe Rick Carlisle is the answer. Maybe he's not. Maybe hiring Dan Burke as our next head coach is the answer. I'm not advocating for firing Rick Carlisle by any stretch of the imagination. But honestly, if the Pacers really wanted to blow this thing up, there's at least two guys you have to keep. Can you guess those two guys?
Chris Duarte is one of them.
Yes.
And then
I will say potentially three, but definitely two.
Sabonis?
Yes, Sabonis is the other definite. And I would say maybe Brogdon just because of the defense that he does bring some nights. But he is a very good scorer. So if you can have a solid core of those three, that's great.
So you even wouldn't count LeVert in there, even though the Pacers gave up Oladipo to get him?
Well, not like Oladipo's done much of anything since the Pacers got him.
Now I know you're about to get on a tangent, and I was like, I'll briefly add what I was gonna say as far as like, because I don't really know, because like that's the thing for me is I don't know what the move is. Like if they make a move, because the thing is that they always seem to, like, we always hear Miles Turner in trade talks, and it never happens. Like I feel like every year we're either saying they're going to we think they should trade him, or we're saying like, hey, there's rumors that Miles Turner could be traded, and he's never traded. And I'm not saying I want to see him go, but I mean at this point I'll believe it when I see it, when he actually gets traded. And then I just think you owe it to yourself to see what this roster looks like fully healthy and like a few games under their belt. I mean, we haven't seen Warren in like, what feels like 2 seasons. It's been only one, but it's just seems like forever. Right. So we haven't seen him since the bubble. You can't see him, we're going to finally get to see LeVert at full force. Like once this team finally gets back together and some, games under their belt, I think you owe, because I mean, right now the Pacers, The Pacers don't have a, superstar caliber player as far as like a guy who could be like the face. I mean, Duarte
I
could
think
be it,
Duarte is going to
but
be, he's
but I
on his
mean,
way.
but as the team stands right now, like they have a good core, they just don't have that one good piece. So I think you
We
owe it.
haven't had that one good piece since Paul George.
Right, but what I'm saying is that like I think you owe it to yourself to see what you have with that core
Right.
fully healthy and together, and with like time to form some chemistry before you say, "Hey, let's blow the whole thing up," and
Yeah.
bring in more players to do that with.
And I agree. If I'm going to talk about blowing the thing up, I'm not like I'm keeping Levert mostly because a lot of this stuff has been, you know, him after he got here. Thank God for the physical that he had to go through, or
Right.
else he never would have realized he had cancer. I mean, you keep him because he has the potential, and he can be a good player. It's just the luck has not aligned for him health wise, and that is nothing. It really hasn't been basketball related, to be honest. I don't even think this back thing was truly basketball related. I think it's something from the cancer, you know. Um, so I'm totally on board with Levert. I'm not ready to ship Levert out. The two guys, though, maybe even three, the three guys that I'm saying we need to utilize them to get better on externally if we needed to do that. I'm looking at Jeremy Lamb. I'm looking at TJ Warren, and I am looking at Miles Turner. I'm looking at those three guys as major potential. Now, if you have because I'm not giving Brogdon up just because they need help at the point guard position. Outside of him, it's rough. And I feel like Duarte's played well enough that even when TJ Warren comes back, are you really going to sit Duarte and have him come off the bench behind unknown TJ Warren at this point? I'm not. I mean, Duarte's been probably one of the most consistent players on the team this entire season. Outside of Sabonis, they're the only two that you could pull up the box score and know they scored close to 20 points in the game. Now, some nights, you got Turner, some nights you got Brogdon, but I think if they do need to go out and try to advance this team to get it better, players like Jeremy Lamb, TJ Warren, and Miles Turner are your best options to move. You're not going to move Duarte or Sabonis. I wouldn't move Levert, and I would also have to say Brogdon's off limits too. And I'm not trading anybody for Ben Simmons. I'm sorry, that's just that's not going to make this team better. Like all of a sudden, the team I guess it could help defensively because we can't stop anybody to save our lives, but I mean, there are the pieces there to move. Yeah, I would love to see this team come to get healthy fully, but it just doesn't feel like it's ever going to happen. That's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. It does. I mean, and I mean, maybe once we get more, further into the season, or maybe get like some sort of like, because I mean, as far as I know, we still don't have a timetable on Warren, do we? Like, we still don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think. I mean, I guess I mean at minimum, you do have Levert back, you do have Duarte, you do have Sabonis. Like maybe Warren is a guy that you either just cut ties with completely, or you dangle out and see, if there are any teams that would be willing to trade for him. Get any
Turn to just him.
Right, and I mean there are some people you could pair with him. I'm just saying that like the like I guess I agree with what you're saying as far as like Brogdon, Levert, Duarte, like keep all those guys obviously. It's a bonus. And then just kind of see what else you can potentially move. But because I mean, like I said, I mean I guess the core doesn't have to be like the whole team, but they definitely owe it to themselves to see. All right, what does this look like? Fully put together and healthy, especially like maybe you can do that too. Be like, hey, this is what we look like with TJ Warren. This is what we look like without TJ Warren. If it doesn't really end up helping a whole lot, then maybe that's another thing too. But I did have one more thought before we wrap up the Pacers talk for the day. I did have a thought yesterday. I was like, What would it take to bring Victor Oladipo back? Like maybe now that he's had some humble pie, like maybe bring him back. Like, hey, remember that time that you like were the guy here, and then you're like, oh hey, I'm too good to be the guy here, so I'm gonna like request my way out, and then you definitely weren't. You've never been good anywhere else besides when you were at the Pacers. Do you want to run that back so maybe you can get back to where you like would like to be in your
I don't
career?
think the fans would welcome him back.
Yeah,
I think
true.
he's burnt that bridge. I think we would be more likely to welcome back Paul George
I mean, but
than
that's just
Victor
time, though.
Oladipo.
I
I
know
think we
it's
would have welcomed back Paul George pretty quickly too, because we knew we were doing PG wrong. We knew we were doing him dirty with the way the roster construction went after we kind of imploded everything from the Eastern Conference final runs.
right.
So whereas, PG went about it the right way, did it behind the scenes, behind closed doors. They had their conversations. Victor Oladipo went out on the court and was talking to other guys saying, "Hey, can I come play with you next year?" I
Yeah.
mean, that really kind of rubs you the wrong way. You're like, you were standing there on the court at now Gamebridge Fieldhouse saying, "This is my city. This is my city." And then a few weeks later, you're like talking to Miami, "Hey, can I come play with you guys next year?"
this is my this is my city. But you know what I would rather my city be? Miami.
South Beach.
Oh my
No,
gosh.
honestly, if they bring back anybody, it's gonna be Lance Stevenson, and
Ooh,
that's
that's true. I mean, come on. I think you just got to bring him back
there's
no matter what.
there's the glue that holds the locker room together. Every time Lance Stevenson's here, the Pacers are good. Every time he's not, they fall apart. Bring back the glue guy.
Rage in the chat says the real question is when is Reggie coming out of retirement? I mean, I'll take Reggie Miller. I'll
I'll
bring
take
him back.
Reggie Miller on the sideline in a suit coaching this team.
Yeah. Oh, over Rick
But
Carlisle,
eventually. Well,
or at least,
I'm not,
as
like I
like.
said, I'm not done on Rick Carlisle yet. I think it was a really good hire. And to be honest, I don't think Reggie's ever going to come stand on the sideline somewhere. He's got too cush of a job
Yeah.
calling games.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's way too much of a headache to come back and coach.
Back into coaching and dealing with all those egos and managing all that when all you have to do is just have fun and talk basketball.
Oh
Come on.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, and hopefully when you guys, if you're listening to it on the podcast apps or you're watching on YouTube, hopefully you guys are coming here after Pacers win. Like I said, they're playing right now. They are playing San Antonio, and that's with like nobody on the San Antonio team. I think Greg Popovich is a player coach this year. So
Hey, they wanted Turner.
yeah, true.
I don't know what we would get in return from them.
So
Patty
hopefully
Mills.
hopefully it's after Pacers win. So hopefully can get relatively healthy and back in shape here soon. But before we get to the college basketball conversation, we first want to get to our friends of the show. First of all, we want to talk about Anchor, which allows us to put on the podcast each and every week. Anchor.fm. You can either record directly to the website itself or do what we do, which is record it and then upload it into the app itself. You can schedule your podcast, even weeks in advance. You can now, I think there's a thing where they allow video podcasting, which is pretty cool. So there's a lot of different avenues that you can go with it, and it's really easy to use, free. You are able to get monetized almost immediately, which is nice. And then you can, upload it into Anchor, and then they distribute the podcast everywhere that you would want to hear the podcast: Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. So that's really nice. So check Anchor out if you are if you're someone who's interested in doing some podcasting. Also, we want to give a shout out to Eat Lunch and Board Game. Adam Collins, my cousin, is the podcaster in charge of that show, and it's a very good show about how board games can build bridges at work and with your friends and that kind of stuff. So a big episode dropped today. So if you guys want to go check that out, after you get done listening to us. It is available right now on all the podcast apps as well. He also uses Anchor, so go check that out as well. He supports us, so we want to support him. And then remember, you can follow us at 3C Media Sports on Twitter, 3C Media on Facebook. You can catch us on YouTube and TikTok, 3C Media. We got TikTok only content over there. We've got YouTube only content over there, including the MCT podcast. Those guys are killing it. Big shout out to Michael, who's doing our thumbnails now. He's doing a good job there. And then remember, you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course podcast. Also, if you're listening to us or watching us on Tuesday, you can come watch us every Monday, twitch.tv/CraigCrash. We live stream the show if you guys want to interact with us in chat, like Paul Rage is doing in the chat. We want to hear from you guys. We want to get your thoughts, and get your feedback on the things that we talk about. So if you want to come watch us live, or even if you're not, even if you come to YouTube, comment, leave a like, subscribe, do all that cool stuff. Go to the TikTok channel, check out the TikTok content. Take a day and fill your head with the 3C Media knowledge that we provide, although I'm a little still bummed about the Crash Wheel of Misery this week because it was not very correct. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the college basketball conversation. And we're going to go through what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Purdue. We're going to talk IU. We're going to talk Notre Dame. And then we've got one, mid-major that each of us are going to talk about as far as, who we think, who's another team to watch. Because there's a lot of, especially at the Division, 1 level, there's a lot of basketball teams in Indiana. So it'd be a really long podcast if we talked about all of them. So we're going to mainly focus on group of Power 5 and then kind of get to some mid-majors at the end. So we want to start. There's no bias here. We went in order of rankings. And so we're going to start off the conversation with the Purdue Boilermakers. Their 2021 season, they were 18-10, 13-6 in the Big Ten. They were fourth. They were seventh in the Big Ten in scoring offense, fourth in the Big Ten in points allowed. In the Big Ten tournament, they lost 87-78 to Ohio State in overtime in the Big Ten tournament quarterfinals. And then, of course, they lost in the NCAA tournament 78-69 to North Texas in the first round. This season, they are the preseason number 7 team. They're one of 2 Big Ten teams in the top 10. They are also joined up there by number 6, Michigan. Their notable returnee is forward Travion Williams. He averaged 16 points a game last season, 9 rebounds. He led the Boilers in both categories. He's in the top 10 in the Big Ten in both categories as well. Second in the Big Ten in rebounds. They do get Sasha Stefanovic back as well, 40% from three-point range in 2020. That led the team. And then the big man on defense, Eric Hunter Jr., 26 steals last season. Notable matchups in the non-conference schedule. They play number 19, North Carolina, and number 24, Florida State. Those are both in Mackey, which is nice. And then the conference, they play number 6.
North Carolina is not in Mackey. North Carolina is at the Mohegan Sun.
Well, there you go. And then, so not in Chapel Hill.
So Villanova. Don't forget about, they'll either play Tennessee or Villanova in that as well.
I gotcha. So
that's their tournament or their,
yeah,
invitation that they're playing in. And just to kind of add into the notable returnees, I wouldn't really necessarily put Sasha Stefanovic and Eric Hunter. The guys that you really got to keep an eye on, Travion Williams, obviously, he's been named a preseason All-American on several lists. Also look out for guard Jaden Ivey, who is popping up in in the top 10 of a lot of NBA mock drafts for this upcoming season. Jaden Ivey had an outstanding offseason representing Team USA at the under 19 World Championships. The U.S. took home gold. He was a teammate with Purdue freshman Caleb First from Fort Wayne, Indiana, who was Indiana's Mr. Basketball. And the other is sophomore center Zach Edey, the big 7'4" Canadian giant. He was on Team Canada in the same championships and made the all-tournament team as well. Those are 3 players that, especially Ivy and Edey, look to really command the floor for Purdue. And honestly, what a lot of Purdue fans are hearing is don't be a bit surprised if the preseason All-American Travion Williams is actually coming off the bench and Zach Edey gets the start at the beginning of the season. Apparently, Zach Edey is tearing it up in team scrimmages and practice and is looking like he could supplant or he could knock out Travion Williams for the starting spot. Now, obviously, that may not last too long. Who knows? Matt Painter early on likes to work with his lineups. So, but yeah, definitely a lot. I mean, basically, this team returns everybody from last year. They did not lose a single person.
Well, because I remember last year we talked about like they had a big ceiling, but also they had like a big floor as well. Like they could be like not in the tournament at all. They could be in the tournament, but not very good. Like there was a lot of different ways, that you could have gone with last season. And also, don't worry, guys. I know B Scott apparently doesn't care about the leader in 3-point shooting or the leader in steals, but I care. I care about.
No. The two you named are very significant in if Purdue wants to win a Big Ten championship and potentially advance to a Final Four or play for a national championship. You need Sasha Stefanovic to be hitting on his marks from outside the arc. When Sasha Stefanovic is on, the whole team plays a lot looser because it really opens up the floor. When Eric Hunter is on defense, it makes the team a whole ton better. And a lot of players need to learn to play up to the tempo and style of defense that Eric Hunter plays. So those two players are crucial for the Boilermakers, obviously. Now it's just the bigger.
But you said forget about them. You said they don't
No,
exist.
no, I didn't say forget.
I know.
I didn't say forget. I said I can't believe you overlooked the two biggest names outside of Travion Williams and Jaden Ivey and Zach Edey. Those are the two players that everybody's talking about along with Travion Williams. But to really make the Boilermakers move this year, you need to have top-notch shooting from Stefanovic, and you need to have top-notch defense from Eric Hunter, a little good shooting from him as well, because, hey, he was one of the best shooters in the state of Indiana in high school at Tinley Prep. And that wouldn't hurt at all either. So it basically the situation Purdue's in this year is a situation they've never been in before. They basically have like 11 guys that can legitimately play. That's the problem for them. And that's it. Most people are like, well, how is that a problem? How is having too many good players a problem? Well, there's not enough minutes to go around. Right. And if you start trying to work the minutes properly, and then all of a sudden you're somebody that's in a rhythm has to get pulled out, or it's a tough situation, honestly, to be in, but it's one that they've never really been in before, and it's a great problem to have.
Right. Yeah, they have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to talent. And that's the question. We're gonna do a hot or cold for each team that we talk about tonight, save for the group of 5 schools. So the question for Purdue is hot or cold. This season is a disappointment if Purdue doesn't make the Sweet 16. And for me, that is a hot take, especially after the disappointment of last season. Now, like I said, I mean, when I say disappointment, I mean just losing to North Texas. Obviously, like I said, their season was very, we don't know what they're going to be. So the fact that they made the tournament, the fact that they were a very good team last year, I think even more adds to the expectations for this coming season, as far as where they could end up being. And looking back at the last 5 seasons, which which excludes 2019 to 20 because there was no NCAA tournament. In 2016 they finished 4th in the Big Ten. That was the year they lost to Arkansas Little Rock. In 2017 they were the Big Ten regular season champions. They lost to Kansas in the Sweet 16. In 2018 they finished 2nd in the Big Ten, lost to Texas Tech in the Sweet 16. In 2019 they finished 2nd in the Big Ten, lost the Elite Eight to Virginia, and then in 2021, they finished 2nd in the Big Ten like regular season.
Nope.
Okay. Anyway,
they tied. I think they tied with Michigan for the Big Ten championship.
Okay.
Maybe that's what they considered second, but they got the trophy because they clinched it at Northwestern.
Yeah. And then in 2021 they finished 4th in the Big Ten, and they were upset by North Texas. So I mean, it basically they're it's a team that the last 5 seasons, like, yes, they have those kind of losses that they stumble over in the NCAA tournament every now and again, but which happens to everybody. A lot of teams in the
That's why
NCAA
we
tournament.
love the NCAA tournament.
Exactly. So, other than that, I mean, pretty consistently they're in the Sweet 16 and beyond. So, I mean, I think you're really going to be bummed, especially with the wealth of talent that they have, if they don't end up in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. And they've, like I said, they've got a lot of talent back. They've got another year under their belt. That insanely good roster has. So I think I think the Boilers are going to be a Sweet 16 team. And I think it's going to be kind of a bummer and a disappointment if they don't make it.
Yeah, well, I agree. This is easily a scorching hot take if they don't make the Sweet 16. I would, a matter of fact, say it's a hot take if they don't make the Elite Eight or even potentially the Final Four. I mean, it's basically for this year for this team. I'm going to say Elite Eight / Final Four or bust, because you're going to lose some of this talent.
Right.
Jaden Ivey, I hate to say it, and if he has a great year, he's bolting for the NBA. I mean, you can't pass up a potential lottery pick to come back and play at Purdue. Nobody would do that, not even for Duke. So yeah, it's definitely a hot. He very well could end up. Right now, the Pacers are positioned to be right where Jaden Ivey is kind of projected to go. He would be a great. Well, let's see. He would probably come in and take. Oh, he'd be right where Duarte is, but he could go in where
trade Duarte.
He could go in where Levert or Jeremy Lamb. If he could take Jeremy Lamb's minutes,
yeah,
easily. But yeah, it's definitely a hot take. I mean, this is honestly, I mean, the best team that Matt Painter has had in his time at Purdue. Probably even better, at least on paper, than the 2010 team that really could have easily been playing for the national championship in Indianapolis had Robbie Hummel not gone down with an injury at the end of the season.
See, that's what's scary to me. You're saying big Elite Eight, Final Four, and I mean, as someone who regularly tells me about how like Purdue's cursed,
but because of the depth of Purdue this year, one injury could be potentially easier to overcome.
Right.
Now, if that injury is to like a Jaden Ivey, it does put a damper on things. But I still think because look, even the year that Robbie Hummel went down with an injury, they still made the Sweet 16 and barely lost to eventual national champion Duke. So
right.
But this team is deeper and much more highly regarded than the rest of that 2010 team was. I mean, Brandon Newman could conceivably slide into Jaden Ivey's starting spot and not miss it. Not play at the same level, but Brandon Newman is a better shooter than Jaden Ivey is. He's just not as good at slashing to the basket as Jaden Ivey is. So, there's Purdue's more in a better position now to absorb a major injury than they were back in 2010. Because basically, when Robbie Hummel goes down, there wasn't too much else behind him at his position to slide in there. I mean, you still need Juwan Moore and Juwan Johnson, but
who was their center they had a couple of years ago that he got hurt before the NCAA
Isaac
tournament?
Haas.
And they got him back
round of the NCAA tournament, and Cal State. I think it was Cal State Bakerfield, or was it Bakerfield or Fullerton? I forget. Oh, Fullerton.
Right.
Their center drug him to the floor, and he broke his elbow. And the Purdue engineers got to work and built him a brace that he would be able to play in, and he was playing okay in warm-ups and practice and everything. But the NCAA said, "Oh, sorry, that
Sorry,
used
no
as a weapon.
robots.
It's like, what?
Sorry, we can't allow robots to play in the
Because
NCAA
well, I mean,
tournament.
it wasn't even fully metal or anything like that. It was pretty padded, but it was just not typical of what you would wear as an elbow brace.
Right.
And they probably had Isaac Haas been healthy. That was another team that probably could have made a run to the Final Four. They would have probably beaten Texas Tech just because, I mean, Texas Tech would have had zero answer for Isaac Haas.
Right. Well, I mean, hopefully you're right. I mean, because this is a Purdue team that like just always seems to be in position to make a big run, and then just never can. What mainly due to injury, just can't seem to get out of their own way in that regard. So hopefully, that's trending in the right direction this season. The Boilers can have a good year. Now moving on to the Indiana Hoosiers. Their 2021 season. They were 12-15, 7-12 in the Big Ten. They were 10th. They were 11th in terms of points scored in the Big Ten, 7th in terms of points allowed. They lost to Rutgers in the second round of the Big Ten tournament, 61-50. They fired Archie Miller, hired Mike Woodson. Their notable returnees. Trace Jackson Davis, he averages 19 points, 9 rebounds last season. He led the team in both categories. But there's the Hoosiers will have to overcome quite a bit. They lose Marcus Carr, who transfers to Texas. Jackson Davis, with Marcus Carr transferring to Texas, Jackson Davis is the Big Ten's leading scorer amongst returnees. And then forward Race Thompson, he averages 9 points per game, which is second among returnees. He also led the team in steals with 28. Their notable matchups this season, they are at Syracuse and Notre Dame. Those are the only two out-of-conference games against Power 5. So they will get to pad their win total a little bit at the beginning of the season. But inside the Big Ten, they play number 7 Purdue twice, number 17 Ohio State twice, number 21 Maryland twice, and Michigan as well as number 11 Illinois. So the question is, hot or cold? The Indiana Hoosiers will make the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2016 because, we know IU fans. We dog on them quite a little bit. I was going to say quite a bit, and that's probably more accurate, but I'll say a little bit just to sound a little bit nicer. But that's pretty much the main goal for the Hoosiers every season is, they want to make the NCAA tournament. They tell you how many banners they have. You kind of wonder how good this team will look, in the regular season. For me, it's a cold take. Like I said, they had a lot of players transfer. Their two key departures from last season is Al Durham. He transfers to Providence. He was averaging 11 points per game. He was 38% from three-point shooting. He was their, second leading three-point shooter. And then they lose Armand Franklin, who transfers to Virginia. He averaged 11 points per game, 42% from three-point range. And this is an IU team that last year, was kind of in a similar position to Purdue in the sense that they had a young team and had a lot to figure out. And they now pretty much have to start from square one again. Obviously they have Jackson Davis back. That's a big piece. He's a good player. He's their best player. And they've got, Race Thompson back as well, but they're going to have to rely on players that they haven't had to rely on before. It's the opposite of Purdue, where Purdue has a wealth of talent, and now Indiana has to figure out who are their talented players that they can rally around. They have a young team. They're uncertain who will step up to take the pressure off Jackson Davis. I do think this is a season for IU where they're going to be better. I think they'll be over 500 on the season, around the 16 to 17 win threshold, because let's be honest, they're going to pad their stats with those, games against, non-Power 5 schools, in those first, 11, 12 games of the season. They are going to play Syracuse and Notre Dame, and those are both also potential wins. If they can, because Syracuse isn't what they used to be, and Notre Dame is struggling as of late as a program, and we'll get to them here in a little bit. So, they could, have a pretty good record going into conference play, but even if they had those players coming back, it's a brutal schedule. Purdue twice, Ohio State twice, Maryland twice, Michigan, Illinois. It's kind of like, it's kind of almost like their football preview where we're like, they're going to have high hopes. And in this case, it's because IU basketball fans always have high hopes. And it's just, if you even if you had everybody back from last season, it was going to be a tough task with the level of talent you have to play, the toughness of your schedule, but you're not coming back the same. There's a lot of teams that are coming back a little bit better. You have a tough schedule. It's just not going to be what you want. So I don't think they're going to be a tournament team. I mean, obviously they're going to pad their win total at the beginning of the year, so I mean that makes them more enticing because of their fan base. And getting eyeballs on one of those blue blood programs. But other than that, I just don't think that it's in the cards for them this season. Maybe another year or two, but I don't see it this season.
Yeah, they all have high hopes because Mike Woodson. Well, I mean, okay, we'll see. And then they also had a great off-season trip to the Bahamas where they beat up on a bunch of high school teams, and it's like, oh my gosh, IU's back. But IU fans, if you're watching this live, it has been 2,081 days since IU last beat Purdue in basketball.
Is that where you were calculating over there?
I was looking that up. I Googled it. If you're watching it on Tuesday, it has been 2,082 days since IU has last beaten Purdue in basketball. Purdue has won 9 straight from 2017 to now. I think it was, March 6th was the last time. It was the beginning of this win streak. So having to have Purdue twice on your schedule is never a good thing when that's the stat that is front and center. I mean, I know, it is. There's actually a person on one of the Purdue message boards that has a live ticker going. I didn't feel like going. But, I feel like, IU, they're so hard to pinpoint. One, we don't really know what this team's going to look like with Mike Woodson as coach. I feel like Archie Miller had zero idea of how to play or how to coach to his players' talents and how to utilize them effectively. I think he knew one style of play, and that was the style he stuck with no matter what. And it was live by the sword, die by the sword type thing. And he did a lot more dying by the sword than living. And I don't want to say this team can't be a tournament team because look, they have a preseason first team All-American in Trace Davis Jackson. If he's utilized correctly, this team could be very good. I mean, they got some good transfers. They do have the setup to be a tournament team. The only thing is, if they stumble at all in the Big Ten and go on a losing streak or, lose to everybody that's ranked higher than them, and they win against the lower level of the Big Ten only, and then they pad their schedule against these cupcakes, the resume just doesn't fit necessarily to make a tournament if you are close to 500. Or if you're a little over 500, you need to have some impressive wins. And that's the thing IU has been lacking truly in the past several years is those impressive resume building wins. But IU's also been known to drop games to teams that they have no business losing to. I hope that this team is, personally, I hope the team's on their schedule, but for IU, I hope they're not. But IPFW, for some reason, IPFW has IU's number, much like Purdue. Maybe because Purdue's in the name. I don't know. And really, I do believe IPFW, the Mastodons now. They've kind of rebranded themselves fully. But
it's Purdue Fort Wayne now. It's not.
That's right. They did take out just PFW.
Yeah, it's PFW now.
Yeah.
It's Purdue Fort Wayne, and they went to officially black and gold now.
Yeah. So maybe that's why. I don't know. But
they were their old. I like their old logo better. It was the blue and gray, and that's when they beat IU is when they were the blue and gray. But still, you said, Purdue's in the name. So
score for that Mastodons team was a Purdue transfer, Bryson Scott. So he was one of those guys that as a career he never lost to IU. But look, I think IU is going to be much better than they were the past few years under Archie. Mike Woodson does understand talent and coaching talent. Now, can he get this team to come together? I'm sure he can. Those offseason trips do help to an extent with chemistry. You get that a little bit more, but I just need to see this team fully in action. I don't care if they blow out Tennessee Tech. You're not getting to the tournament by beating a team like that. That doesn't do you anything. But if you can take it to Syracuse or take it to Notre Dame or shock somebody in Assembly Hall, yeah, you have a fighter's chance to make the tournament. Do I think they're going to be contending for the Big Ten? No way, not a chance. I think the best prediction for IU is probably middle of the pack. I would say, I think as high as pushing for a top 8 in the Big Ten. And that would show really good progress for this team, in my opinion. If they can be consistent and not look like they're outcoached or outplayed every single game that they lose, that they look competitive at least, I think that's a huge step in the right direction for them.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they can
believe it. I actually gave a positive.
Right.
spin.
Yeah, I'm proud of you.
Well,
Moving
because I will say this. For the rivalry to be back to where it was when it was Gene Katie and Bobby Knight, and to make it a fun rivalry, IU needs to be competitive. I
Yeah.
mean, you want them to be competitive just because I remember when I was at Purdue, my freshman year, IU was good. I mean, IU was really good. They had DJ White. They were good for a couple of years while I was at Purdue. I mean, then the second year they were awesome with like Eric Gordon and all that, but that all fell apart when coaching scandal. But seriously, my freshman year, it was my first Purdue IU experience in Mackey Arena, and the place was deafening. I mean, it always Mackey Arena is always deafening, but it's a different energy when IU is good, and so is Purdue because they're both teams are playing for something more than just beating my in-state rival. They actually consistently are playing for something more, and we want to get back to that, to be honest, because it's not it. Yeah, we like beating them, but it's just not as much fun.
Yeah, it's like Ohio State, Michigan in football the last few years, or last decade. Like
Right.
it's not fun when it's just so one sided. So yeah, and hopefully IU's gonna take a step back in the right direction this year.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on, another team that needs to take a step back in the right direction is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Their 2020-21 season, they were 11-15, 7-11 in the ACC. That was good enough for 11th. They were 8th in the ACC in scoring, 14th in the ACC in points allowed per game. They defeated Wake Forest 80-77 in the first round of the ACC tournament before getting absolutely throttled by North Carolina in the second round, 101-59. This season, their key returnees, they've got a lot of good players coming back. They've got Prentice Hub. Yeah, he led the team with 15 points per game. You have Nate Lazuski back. He averaged 13.7 rebounds per game. He is their leading rebounder. And they get back Trey Wirtz, 43% from the three-point line. So from beyond the arc, he's really good. Second among returnees behind Lazuski as far as three-point shooting goes. Notable matchups this season. In the non-conference, they go to number 11 Illinois. They also play at home against number 10 Kentucky. In their conference, obviously, ACC is pretty tough. Number 9 Duke, number 19 North Carolina, number 25 Virginia, and at number 20 Florida State. So hot or cold is the question for Notre Dame is, will they finish above 500 in the ACC for the first time since 2016-2017? I mean, this is, it's kind of crazy to think it's been that long since Notre Dame's really been that competitive. In that stretch, the only time they were not didn't have a losing record in the ACC was a year they went 10-10. There was one year they went 3-15, which was really weird. This Notre Dame team, which it wasn't that too long ago, they were good. Maybe they're still reeling after the loss to Ball State. We'll never know. But I mean, it's crazy to think about, Notre Dame not being, one of the better teams, at least in the state. But the question is, Will Notre Dame finish above 500 in the ACC? I think it's a hot take. Notre Dame returns a lot of talent. They also add Yale transfer Paul Atkinson. He averages 18 points a game. He's got 7 rebounds last season. So, I mean, they add another talented player. I mean, of course, we talk about it all the time in basketball. You add, another good piece to that puzzle. It's not like football, not like baseball, where, like, yeah, you want to add pieces, but there's, those pieces are kind of drown out in the rest of the makeup of the team. Whereas you add one guy in basketball who is a difference maker. I mean, he can really turn the tides for you. They do have they do have to contend with Duke and North Carolina being better this season and back to their form. But the ACC also as a whole isn't as tough as years past. They're not necessarily as deep as we usually are talking about them. And so Notre Dame's schedule is a little bit more favorable. And just kind of like IU, I think they'll finish in the middle of the pack in the ACC. That should put them around 500 in the conference. And I think the Irish are talented enough to get there. I mean, I think they can be around 500. And so I'll just bank on them being better than 500, which I don't think is too hard of an ask to think that they might be there. And who knows? Maybe they can. I don't think they're a tournament team or anything, but maybe they can. If they can get a couple, hey, you know what? If things click and they beat like Kentucky or they beat Illinois, I mean, maybe that's something that can be on the resume. I don't think they will necessarily, but I think Notre Dame will have a maybe not as what we're used to seeing is from Notre Dame as far as a good season, but I think they'll have a good like back on track season where they kind of get back to what we're used to seeing them.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a hot take as well. I feel like Notre Dame does have what it takes to pull a few upsets. I think they may be able to beat IU in the Crossroads Classic. I don't know. There's that. I will say the addition of Paul Atkinson. Don't sleep on that addition whatsoever. For somebody to average 18 points and 7 rebounds a game, I don't care what league they played in. I don't care at all. That is not an easy thing to do, to average close to 20 points and 10 rebounds. Not easy. Now, can that transition from the Ivy League over to the ACC? Possibly. To be honest, I think it could. I mean,
I was like, the Ivy League is one of the, I think not maybe one of the better leagues, but they're at the top. They have some good teams.
Oh yeah, they definitely do. They're one of those leagues that you don't want to have to face one of their teams in the first round. Well, really, their only team. They only need to get one team in because they are a small league, very small. Right. But yeah, I think Notre Dame can do it, and if they don't, that could also be just as good for them as well. To be honest, for Notre Dame, I really believe for them to see success in the future, I hate to say it, but I feel like they need to break up with Mike Brey.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's been a rough few years.
It may be time to get a different voice in there because it feels like that voice has just gotten stagnant. And I remember it used to be like Notre Dame was tough to recruit against in basketball too, because people wanted to go there. And this was a team that was killing it for years in the Big East. And I mean, those days with Luke Herringody, I felt like he was there forever. But ever since then, it's just kind of
they've had a couple good years in the ACC too. They have, I mean, hell, it's not that long ago they were in the they were playing Kentucky for a spot in like the Elite Eight or whatever it was. But
that's true. Yeah, that is true. But I just kind of feel like recently Mike Brey I don't know if it's because of all the weirdness of like the COVID years and all that. Maybe we need to see them in a full legitimate year. I really don't know. It's just something has seemed off with this team for a couple seasons now. Hopefully they can get back into form. If they do, that's great. Awesome. If not, I feel like Mike Brey's seat is hot this year.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't think that's, I don't think that's a hot take at all. I think because like we talked about, I mean, it has been a while. I think it's been it's been long enough. Like, it's not like an
Mhm.
IU thing where, like, oh, hey, he didn't win in his first year, so is he on the hot seat? Like, no, it's not one of those things. Like, it is. I mean, heck,
We've seen a
2016,
drastic downturn.
right? 2016, 17, like I said, is the last time they were above 500 in your conference. I mean, that's not
That's a long time.
yeah, that's not a short period of time where like, well, you need to, you had one bad year. Like, no, it's been a few now, including like one year that you were like 3-15 in the
Mm.
conference. So I
And this
mean,
is an athletic department that prides itself on winning and being a having winning traditions.
right. So I wouldn't be shocked about that at all. So I mean, I think that's on the right track. So yeah, I think Notre Dame's going to have kind of like IU. It's not going to be maybe up to what the standards we're used to seeing them, but it's going to be a solid okay year. Like, it's going to be one where you're not gonna they're gonna match up against a team in their respective conference tournaments, and maybe you're not gonna completely be like, well, this is a loss, we don't even need to watch this. I think it's
Right.
gonna be an okay year for both
And
those teams.
unfortunately, I think we're looking at the state of Indiana truly only getting one team into the tournament.
Yeah, because as we transition now, we're gonna talk about one non-power 5 school to watch, and I was looking for a team to put in there, and it just makes me sad because, like, I wanted, like, I'm sad about because normally in our pregame or our Indiana preview for basketball, we're talking about Butler. They're not going to be very good this year. They haven't really been that good since moving to the Big East. They've had a few years here and there, but and then you've got like I was looking at the Missouri Valley Conference because there's 3 Indiana teams in there. Evansville's supposed to be bad. Indiana State has a new coach. They're supposed to be bad. Valpo's supposed to be bad. I was like, okay, well then cool. I'll shout out my alma mater, Ball State. They're supposed to be bad. So I was like, you know what? I found I found the leading one of the leading scorers in the country last year. Like, went to IUPUI. He's not there anymore. So I was like, what do I do? what are we talking about as far as mid-major schools in the state? And so the school I went to, we talked about them a little bit earlier. Purdue Fort Wayne, the Mastodons. Their starting 5 is all seniors. You've got a transfer from Mount St. Mary's, Damian Chongqui. He averages 15 points a game. You also have Jared Godfrey, who averages 16 points a game, Jalen Pipkins, who averages 14 points a game, and Bobby Planutis, who averages 10 points a game. They were 40% from beyond the arc last season. They were one of even with that, they were still one of the worst field goal shooting teams across in the country in terms of like mid-range jumpers. So like they were solid if they either hit 3-pointers or layups. Like they didn't hit anything from like the mid-range point of view. And they were bad defensively as well. So like they obviously have some work to do. They obviously have to have it all come together this season. But hey, I mean, it's a team that has decent enough upside where like I don't know. I mean, they're in the Horizon League. I don't know how. I mean, I think Wright State made it from the Horizon League last year, so I don't know how much of a stranglehold they have. But like, hey, maybe if the stars align, or maybe if like the Mastodons have good enough shooters where if like they get hot in the tournament, like they could end up being the second team for the state of Indiana, in the NCAA tournament. So I mean, they are projected 8th, but if they can kind of clean up all the mistakes from last year, which I mean, a lot of that they were from what I can read, from what I read, like were rocked pretty hard by COVID last year. So like that could be a reason why they weren't very good last year either. So like maybe once they get a normal, good year, maybe it can all come together. Maybe they're a dark horse for the Horizon League. So that was like the one silver lining I found across the state.
Yeah, it is tough to find one. I want to go with Butler so bad. I'm going to say Butler is just one to watch because the city of Indianapolis and the state of Indiana needs Butler to be good. They need Butler to be good. Even if, we don't need Butler to be 2010, 2011, that time frame, 2000 or 2012, whatever those years were.
Yeah.
When they're making runs to play in the national championship game. We don't need that. We need Butler to be competitive because when Butler's competitive, there's a different buzz about the state of Indiana. I think Butler is the one team that all fans of college basketball in the state of Indiana, no matter who your team is, can honestly get behind, except when they're playing your team, and cheer for. I mean, Purdue fans don't hate Butler. We don't. We love Butler. They gave us Micah Shrewsbury. Well, Brad Stevens did, but it's maybe IU fans hate Butler just because Butler's kind of owned them.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll say that.
Butler's been more successful in the last 30 years than IU has.
And when the spotlight's not on IU fans hate that. So maybe I can't say all fans, but they're a team that you can't hate them. You really can't, and that's why the state of Indiana is better as a basketball state when Butler is competitive, when Butler's good, not, we don't care if they're championship caliber good, just tournament. They're fun to watch in the tournament. They're fun to get behind. So it's not a team to watch like they're going to be sneaky good. It's a team I'm going to say, watch them. Just watch them. Literally, please, just watch them because they're fun to watch. It's Butler. And I don't know. I've always felt that way. I don't know if it's because I spent a lot of time around Butler University as a kid or, my high school when we played in regionals for basketball, it was at Hinkle, or if it's the magic of Hinkle Fieldhouse and, with it being the home of where the championship game was played in Hoosiers or whatever it may be. It's just Butler just needs to be competitive and all feels right then in the world of college basketball.
No, I'm with you. When you said the whole, they're the team the whole state roots for, that's how I feel about them too. You just kind of rally around them when they're good. So I'm with you 100%. So, hopefully Butler can get back some of their magic that we're used to seeing them.
Where they're fun to watch.
Right. Right. Well, I do. Before we end the podcast, I do have some good breaking news to report. The Pacers do beat the Spurs. So that's good. 131 to 118. 2-7. Don't call it a comeback. The Pacers are back in gear. 2-6 actually. So, but hey, you know what? The Pacers season are they back? That's going to be next week's podcast. Are the Pacers back to Eastern Conference Finals form? They beat the Spurs. I know. But anyway, so hey, some good news to end on there. That will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Remember that you can follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports, like us on Facebook, 3C Media. Go over to the TikTok and YouTube channel for not only to see us, but to see our exclusive content over there, 3C Media, on both of those two things. And then remember, you can watch us every week live. Thank you guys all in the chat, rage in here. Supporting, everybody who, just tuned in general, rage, giving us some feedback there, which was always nice. Twitch.tv/CraigCrash. And then remember, you can listen every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. You can find me at Crash Course FM on Twitter. B. Scott, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
We will be back next week to talk some college basketball on the national level. We also will have the World Series to talk about, the end of that one, and kind of a look ahead to next season as well. So another fun-filled week of sports talk coming at you next week. But until then, have a good one, everybody.